Now the movie starts off with two girls making out in the forest somewhere. After making out, Sophie, the girl with the braids, tells her little girlfriend, "Hey, I love you." And her girlfriend looking at her like, love? Apparently they're going to Sophie's friend's house for a pool party, a little get together for the weekend. Now we get this slow-mo shot of everybody underneath the water holding their breath. Come up from that water for you drown. Everybody's happy to see Sophie, or they might be happy.
Sophie, what is she doing here?
Sophie introduces B to her friends, and she gets to this guy that is in this floaty who clearly is 40 years old and everybody else is in their 20s. There's a girl named Jordan who is giving Sophie the third degree, like I would have had to knock her back into that pool. B brings up something called zucchini bread and nobody is impressed. They want liquor. They don't want no zucchini bread, baby. Now, once they get in the house, B and Sophie are making out again. Pete Davidson walks in the room and it's giving haunted house. B is walking around admiring the furniture and the furnishings of the house when we get to see young Pete Davidson. Okay, Pete, I see you. Jordan walks up on B and I'm getting the vibes that she wants B. I don't know what's going on with her, but I'm getting very much hater vibes from her, or she's a jealous ex. Pete Davidson is talking to Sophie and he's basically trying to compare himself to the 40-year-old man who was on the floaty. Throughout this movie, Pete Davidson gives off narcissistic, insecure, little man. Pete is basically asking her, what are you doing here and who was that girl you brought with her and why is she here? B comes downstairs and she's like, hey, what's the Wi-Fi? They're like, oh my God, I don't know because it's an actual good password. Let me email it to you. We see that B wanted the Wi-Fi password so she can call and check up on her mom, which is really sweet. You could tell that B does not belong with these people. B is sitting here smashing this chocolate cake and it's giving Brucey from Matilda. Most of these people are high off their own supply. That's when Sophie stops all the music and everybody's like, no. She says, hey, who wants to play bodies, bodies, bodies? Now we're getting to the nitty gritty. Now, before they start the game, they partake in taking some shots and slapping each other around. If somebody hits me too hard, I'm going to jail. Pete proceeds to punch Uncle Gary a little too hard. They cut off all the lights and they begin to play bodies, bodies, bodies. Now, once the game begins, we get to see that they are basically playing hide and seek in the dark and somebody's gonna get poked up by a little knifey knife. Uncle Gary ends up becoming the body that's on the floor, and for a minute, I was like, hold on. Did they already get started with the slashing and thrashing of a knife? They're trying to figure out who the killer is, and Uncle Gary's getting the third degree from Pete Davidson. The boys have a staring contest where they're comparing each other's egos and whatnot. So Uncle Gary goes on about his business. Pete, if I was Uncle Gary, I would have blacked your other eye. Just saying. The power goes out. And I'm like, yes, are we finally going to get to the thrashing and slashing of the bodies, bodies, bodies? B has to pee, so she asks where the bathroom is and they tell her it's downstairs. So she makes her way downstairs and she gets to the kitchen when she sees Pete Davidson sliding down the door, bloodied up. That's when Sophie comes in and Pete Davidson bangs on the door one more time, goes outside to check on him, and he is dead. They try to figure out what happened to Pete Davidson because there's a big slash on his neck and they're trying to figure out what's going on. The girls are so scared. They're running for their lives in this storm, in this rain, and they get to Sophie's car and we realize that in the beginning of the video, B left the visor down and the mirror open, which drained Sophie's battery. The car is not starting. The battery and Pete Davidson have something in common right now. They're both dead. The girls make it back in the house and they're trying to clean off Pete Davidson's blood. It's a mess. Jealous Jordan went to go check on the generator and she found the sword. The machete has blood all over it. Jordan may be annoying and comes off a little bit mean, but she's very smart in grabbing this meat cleaver out of the drawer and protecting herself. Allison is screaming like a Karen and is wondering why she's gonna have a knife. Do you not see what happened to Pete Davidson, Missy? Protect yourself. Now they start asking Alice about Gary. They're like, how long have you known him? Do you know his last name, his middle name? And Alice has only known Uncle Gary for 2 weeks. She doesn't know his last name or his middle name or anything about him other than he's a vet. While they're trying to figure out who Greg is, Alice takes it upon herself to start screaming Greg's name while they're whispering if he may or may not be the killer. This is why she annoys me. After some time, they found Emma, who ran off because Pete Davidson's death just scarred her so bad. Girl, you are free. Rejoice. Allison pulls out some Xannies and her and Emma pops one. They find Uncle Gary in the gym and he has on his LED mask and he's just laying there, chilling out, vibing. And they wake him up and they tell him that Pete Davidson is dead and they think that he did it. He's thinking that they're playing and they're joking. Jordan whips out a Michael Myers knife and is pointing it at Uncle Gary. And Uncle Gary's like, is that my go bag? Is that my knife? So they start tussling over the knife. And Uncle Gary gets a hold of the knife and he's pointing it at Sophie. And B comes up behind and hits Uncle Gary in the head with a weight. Clobbers him. After B clobbers Uncle Gary, Jordan is like, well, he clearly killed Pete Davidson because he's a vet, right? Alice is like, no, he's an animal veterinarian, not a veteran. So now we see that Uncle Gary possibly was murdered for no reason. Now, when the girls go back to the living room, this seems to be too much for Sophie. So she goes in the other room and partakes in some snowflake activity. When she comes back, she is on one and she is feeling herself. She is reading Emma down to the filth. After all of that, Alice is like, where is B? B is upstairs trying to get out of these bloody clothes because she just caught her first body. We now see Sophie going through Monopoly boxes and game boxes. I'm like, girl, is this really the time to be playing games? But no, she's actually looking for some drugs that Pete Davidson has hidden amongst the balls or whatever. When she finds what she's looking for, she runs into Emma and she apologizes. She's like, I didn't mean that. Do you want to take some drugs? Emma starts making out with Sophie and I'm like, girl, your boyfriend just died. But clearly she's going through something. Sophie wasn't having it though. She's like, girl, you always think somebody wants you. Jealous Jordan calls out for Sophie, but it's interrupted when she sees B. She basically gets the ick and turns around. Now Alice is running around with her little glow sticks in the dark and she ends up slipping on some blood and what do you know? Emma is gone. Rest in peace to Emma. The girls are freaking out because clearly the killer is still on the loose because what happened to Emma? Alice is acting crazy. She's screaming. She's like, I told y'all it wasn't Greg. Somebody pushed Emma. Alice is unhinged. She's trying to figure out who the killer is in the game because clearly they are collecting bodies. Now, she starts to turn her suspicion on B and is like, you come up here. We've already looked you up. You're not even a graduate at the school you said you graduated at. B's skeletons come out the closet. She is unemployed. She's been lying to Sophie this whole time because she didn't want Sophie to think that she was just some broke girl. Jordan and Alice are double teaming B and they're like, you killed Greg. We cannot trust you. Alice starts pushing B around and ends up kicking her out the house in the rain, locking her out. That's when B runs to the car and pushes down the window that was already down in the beginning and gets in the car. At this point, the car is probably the safest place to be because if you're in the house or around the house, you might just end up gone, dead, finito. When B is in the car and she's basically tackling these hot Cheetos, she really made me want some at this moment because I have never seen Cheetos look so good. Now, what's crazy is B is in the back sniffing some yellow panties. And it just so happens that these yellow panties might match the ones that she had earlier in her hand, who happens to belong to Jealous Jordan. B ends up finding her way back into the house through like this doggy door. So she's back in the house, which she should have stayed in the car. B comes in the house and tells Sophie, get away from Jordan. She got a blicky in her pocket. And when Jordan tries to reach out to Sophie, Sophie backs up and is like, get away from me. B explains to Sophie, yes, I did lie to you, but it's because I really wanted you to like me. Aww, this is why I said B does not belong with these people. She also tells Sophie that her mother is sick. That's why she had to quit her job. That's why she had to quit school, is because her mom was sick with borderline. In the middle of this touching moment, Alice finds it upon herself to say she has body dysmorphia. Alice, baby, nobody asked you. Now is not the time for your shit, Alice. Well. Jordan does have a gun. Jealous Jordan is being so mean. She tells Sophie, we didn't even want you here. I told you in the beginning, nobody wanted her here. She just couldn't pick up on these vibes. While Jordan is going on this rant, she basically reveals that her and Sophie hooked up in her car 2 weeks ago. That's why the panties were in the car. That's when Sophie has had enough. She says, you don't even like Alice or her stupid little podcast. Ooh, the skeletons are coming out the closet with this one. That's when Alice has had enough. It's one thing to talk about her drug habit, but to talk about her podcast, that's where she draws the line. That's when she gets up and tells Jordan, nobody even likes you, babes. I don't like you. Nobody likes you. We just tolerate you. I guess jealous Jordan has had enough, and she decides to bust a cap in Alice's leg. Alice is acting crazy and belligerent because she just got shot in the leg. Now they all start wrestling for this gun, and the gun goes off. Rest in peace to Alice. Bea and Jordan start fighting over the gun, and that's when Sophie runs up and knocks Jordan over the banister and she falls on a glass table. The last thing Jordan says, which took me out completely, was, check her text.
Check her text.
Now, after this, Bea runs away from Sophie because she tells Sophie, you scare me like, I can't be with you, babe. When Bea comes outside, it's morning time, and that's when Sophie comes out and hugs her. And she's like, Sophie, give me that phone. Let me check that phone, because that girl ain't just go out dying saying check your phone for nothing. That's when they wrestle and they end up picking up a phone that does not belong to Sophie. They realize that it's Pete Davidson's phone. And that's when they see that the reason that Pete Davidson died is because he was doing a TikTok with the machete, and he ended up hitting his own self in the neck. Nobody killed Pete but Pete. Everybody died for no reason. That's when at the end of this movie, Max, who is the character they talk about throughout the movie, he's the one who gave Pete Davidson the black eye. He walks up and he's like, what happened? And the only thing Bea can say is, I have reception now. And that's the end of the movie. This movie was crazy because I really thought that they had a killer on the loose that was taking them out, when it really started with an accident and Pete Davidson took himself out. So everybody died for no reason. Everybody except for Bea and Sophie and Max, who has been gone all night, who we kind of thought was the killer in the beginning. Anywho, what do you guys think about this movie? Have you seen it? What's your take on it? Talk about it below in the comments. It's your girl Letty, and we hope to see you again next time.